Hey, it's Sylvan, and this is the Handpan Podcast. This may seem like an odd introduction for this episode, but bear with me here, it'll make sense. I want to talk about YouTube for a moment. If you've listened to this podcast at all, you've heard multiple mentions of YouTube as the way many of us discovered the handpan and developed a passion. YouTube was a new distribution model. Unlike traditional media like cable TV or radio, which need their content to appeal to a broad enough audience, YouTube allowed for anyone to share their art, however specific or niche it may be. The point is, YouTube at first was not about financial viability. It was about the simple joy of creating. It gave people a voice. And man, do you remember these early years on YouTube discovering and marveling at the epic and hilarious and just overall remarkable things that everyday people do? Now, it's interesting to me that the beginning of YouTube coincided with the arrival of the Hong from pen art. Obviously, we know that YouTube largely contributed to catapult the Hong from a quiet local invention to a global phenomenon. But I think there's a deeper parallel here, maybe even a cultural shift. Just like YouTube allowed for anyone to share their art, unlike traditional media, the Hong allowed for anyone to create music, unlike traditional musical instruments. The result? We discovered hidden treasures that we would have otherwise missed. And these hidden treasures aren't events isolated in time either. No, they shape our lives. In a world of cause and effect, some of these hidden treasures had an effect far exceeding their cause. Josh Rivera is a prime example of this, and I am delighted to bring Josh back to the podcast to tell you more about his personal story, and also to catch you up on what he's been up to recently. So here we go. Josh, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to hear you again.
Yeah, I know. You're my first repeat guest on the show.
It's a huge honor on this episode, that's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's a celebration.
Yeah, it is. A lot has changed over the last year.
I know, and that's kind of what I want to ask you about because you've had a really busy year. So last year, you and I did an episode called The Art of Blending. We talked about handpan tuning, how artful and organic and just fascinating it is.
Mm-hmm.
But in that conversation, we didn't actually get too much into your own story. And that's kind of what I want to do today, sort of leading back up to this milestone, this big announcement that you have to make. But I think it's necessary to draw that picture to sort of build that backdrop before we can get there. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I know that you go way back, and so I definitely do want to take some time to talk about what you've been up to recently. But I thought, why don't you do a quick chronological timeline of your history with this instrument? How did it all begin?
Long story short would be 2006 is about when YouTube came out. I believe maybe somewhere close to there, maybe 2004 or 5 at the earliest or so. And I was always a percussionist and a world drummer. Got really obsessed with, actually when YouTube came out, I got pretty obsessed with tabla and watching darbuka players from all over the world and just having my mind blown by what people are just doing in their homes that aren't these big famous people on stage. That was just blowing me away that just a person can sit down and it's like, this is what I do, and I'm going to share it with you on YouTube. And it's some of the most amazing things I've ever seen, even outside this professional world of musicians. You're finding all these people that they just do this stuff every day in their own houses. And I was fascinated with it. So I got lost on YouTube for A lot, hours on the weeks. And so then one day I was looking up tabla performances and came across a player that was playing the hong and the pan art hong, and I got incredibly lost, as you can imagine, and went down the rabbit hole of trying to say basically, I am going to do whatever it takes to buy this instrument. It's just going to happen. I'm getting one today. And as a lot of us know, especially like you and I being at the very beginning of this, we realized that that wasn't exactly so possible. So by the time, it took me about 3 days to even find out what the instrument was. Lots and lots of research later, I finally found the forum, the original forum, that was all about handpan and all these handpan enthusiasts. At the time, there was no handpan; it was just the hong. Mm-hmm. And so, all these hong enthusiasts, and I got directed towards Ron Kravitz through the forum, and Ron Kravitz said he can't help me out at that time, but he directed me to a gentleman in Canada, and I sent him an email, and he gave me his email address and told him to email him right away because he's going to be going to Bern to I guess Pan Art used to just open up periodically to sell instruments. They'd have people out, and it was like a big almost just kind of like a big gathering. People would show up, they'd get to pick their instruments, they would jam, hang out. It was like the original handpan gathering, right?
Yeah.
And so he said he goes there to help out with the English speaking for the people that come out from around the world, and that if I emailed him right away, I could maybe get on his list before he went. So I sent an email, told him I was incredibly interested. What would it take to get a hold of a hong? And I kid you not, I had just sent the email. I clicked send, and I got a phone call within maybe 2 minutes, and it was so fast. And it was him, and he just said, "Hey, I am leaving for Bern next week. I have one spot left on my list. I can bring back a handful of instruments to sell as a kind of a thank you for helping out. And I've got one spot on the list, so I need to know pretty much right now if you're serious about this. And if so, I need you to send this much money to Switzerland." And I'm sitting here just thinking, I was like, nah, this has got to be a scam. There's got to be someone just sitting around waiting for some guy like me to come along, send an email, and then just get an easy check from this guy, right? And I still went ahead and did it. I was like, sure, okay, but like whatever it takes. And so I wrote a check and I sent it off. And I remember I turned around and looked at my wife and I was like, "Oh, baby, we got to talk. I just committed to something that might be a little bit unorthodox, but." So yeah, I had gotten really lucky. I sent the check to Switzerland, and 3 months later, I got to pick the scale, which nowadays, as you can imagine, I was at the very, very, very end of when they shipped them out, and getting to pick the scale that they were going to build for me was another rarity.
Yeah.
And so I got to pick the scale, and so from the day I first saw the hong to the time it was in my lap was actually about 3 months. And that was back in 2006. And so the way everything kind of fell into place, it was almost just like this natural progression that was kind of just, it felt like this is my new path, if you will. And everything from there, from the time the hong showed up, I kind of feel like it kind of took over the rest of my life in a really good way. I was kind of in the middle of life where there was a lot of directions, trying to decide which direction I wanted to take for my future, and what kind of things I wanted to do, and what kind of jobs I wanted to have, or what was it going to be. And I was kind of struggling. Actually, it's like we all go through that period. We have those periods in life where you really want to have your purpose and your goal laid out for you in a way, not necessarily laid out for you, but you really want to know what that is. And when you're trying to search that out and you can't find it, it's a really difficult time. Mm-hmm. And I was really, really just kind of confused and lost, and it came along, and next thing you know, it changed my musical approach and understanding. Next thing you know, I was performing a lot with it. Next thing I knew, I was traveling with it. And then next thing you know, I was meeting a lot of these people from around the world, and it just kind of was that object that helped define a new path. And so, that's kind of my quick, short little story on how what my history is with the Hong.
Yeah. Yeah, what I love is the transformation. I mean, there was a clear before and after, and obviously it took, you know, 13 years between the time that you discovered the Hong and where you're at today.
hmm
But yeah, I mean, I love what you just shared that back then you didn't really have a clear sense of direction for your life, and that this instrument has played a big role. And it's been really neat to see that solidify and sort of morph into what seems like from the outside your life's calling. I mean, it seems like you were made to do what you're doing.
hmm
When you first discovered the Hong and then handpans, did you know from day one that you would be tuning steel, or would you have never imagined that that's the direction your life would take?
Oh no, I there's no way I would have ever, from the first day I saw the Hong, even the first day I played it, there was never an inkling that this would be something I would get into. My dream when I first got one was like I wanted to be pretty much like I wanted to be like David Kucherman, you know. I was like I want to play really well, I want to practice, and I want to perform and all that stuff. And yeah, in the end, I just found, well, hey, I didn't have the degree of passion to practice like you need to, and I found that my joy on the handpan was because I had studied tabla and I had studied darbuka, and there's so many right ways to do it and so many wrong ways to do it. And when I first saw the Hong, it just felt like a completely blank, clean slate for something that I didn't feel like I could do wrong or I could do right. It was just
Hmm.
something that just sounded amazing. I could just sit down and truly enjoy myself without having to thinking to myself, like, what would people say about it online? And I remember the very first YouTube video I ever posted I'm playing terribly on it. Really, I'm hitting it hard. It's blaring out at me. I mean, I'm doing all the wrong things, but I had like especially at that time, I didn't realize this could be a thing. I think I had like 30,000 views on that video, and I was just
Yeah.
like, what? And I look back at it now, I'm like, man, that was some really bad playing, but it didn't really matter because nobody knew any better, you know? It was just a really cool new instrument, and then someone was just having fun, and that's how all those videos were at the beginning, was just, it was just a neat new experience, and there was no judgment. It was just like, wow, that is amazing. And yeah, simple times, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And to a certain extent, I think that's how it should continue to be because
Oh
we
yeah,
put these expectations and fears. Um,
comparisons and
yeah. And actually, something that I often talk about mentioning you is that whenever we're at a gathering and you're performing, you're always improvising. And to me, one, that's super refreshing because you play something that's totally unique and new. Second, it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and to create in the moment.
mhm.
So all that to say that I just think that your history with the instrument is such a good example. You're such an ambassador for this art form, and I also love that even though you've evolved into being a superhuman now, we can still relate to you because you're also a handpan player, and you experience the simple joy of creating. Um,
Mhm.
So, and I'm going to build a little bit more suspense here before we get to the big announcement. But talk to me about the years with Mark at Saraz, uh, just the volume kind of being thrown into this company that is one of the world's best handpan makers that produced a lot of handpans. So you went
Mhm.
from total scarcity to having your hands on a lot of instruments. What was that
Mhm.
like personally?
Oh, it was quite intense, as you can imagine. I had started to learn to tune about maybe a year before I joined them. And so I had gotten to the point where I was decently being able to, control frequencies and not struggling too hard to get notes in a tune, but still definitely very green, very new to the form. And so when I joined Shiraz, Mark had actually just hurt his back pretty badly. And so his tuning was kind of out of commission to a point. He could only do so much. And, there was altogether maybe 5 or 6 employees, maybe at that time, yeah, maybe even 6 or 7 employees. And so, as you can imagine, if tuning stops, a lot stops in the whole company.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I jumped in, it was pretty much trial by fire. To get me warmed up, they created a chromatic set, which, Mark was always, his dream was always to try to build his chromatic sets. And so we were diving into that because there was an album being recorded with E.W. Harris out of New York, who was coming up to do this album, which was a wonderful album. He's such a good, talented musician and writer. And so we were creating the set for that album, and it gave me a chance to tune pretty much every note that they did and that Shiraz created. And so I tuned all the notes pretty much right off the bat. And granted, it's like before all this, there was a build up to the job. He had me out doing one of the festivals and let me spend it was Hangout USA, and I spent maybe a couple days afterwards spending time with him, just talking about tuning, talking about the whole company. Is it something I would be interested in? And of course I was. And so he said, why don't you come back in October and spend another week with me? We can do some tuning, see how things go. And after all that, he's like, you've got, how to tune, and you've got a job if you want it. And living in North Dakota, we're like, done. Let's move to Asheville, North Carolina, where it's beautiful and the weather is much, much nicer. And I get to work with this awesome company and these great people. And so so it was really intense to move out, to quit the job, have our whole family move out for this really interesting new medium, where it's not like going to become a doctor or become something, or any other job that seems much more traditional. This was a very outside the box kind of a thing to jump into, and so there's always that little bit of fear. And then it was pretty much going into tuning for customers and having people, there's names on these instruments. This isn't just me sitting in my basement anymore, hammering. There's actually a name on it, and this is going to go to someone. And so it was incredibly exciting and incredibly intense, and I had lots and lots of meltdowns where I was just terrified of not being good enough, terrified of not, not learning enough to be better, and all kinds of insecurities that come out of this. I think tuning steel in general is a very I think I even said it in our last podcast. I feel like it's like looking into a mirror at all times. It reflects a lot of where you're at when you're working in the steel. If you start having if your emotions get too heavy, there's probably something going on you need to step back from, and the steel will let you know that really quickly. And so there was a lot of change in the air, and then we kind of slowly but surely kind of fell into more of a normal groove with each other. And then it was just, I think in my entire time there I tuned, I don't know, maybe around 350 instruments in the course of about almost 4 years. And so not a ton, but if I add up all the retunes as well with those 4 years, I mean, I feel like those 4 years were nothing but tuning. Wow. So just tuning and tuning and tuning. So it was an incredible experience. I got to cut my teeth in a lot of different ways through, just developing the Shiraz with Mark, and then doing retunes on the side for other builders and everything. It was this 4 years of intense education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so throughout that time, you continued to come together and to contribute in all sorts of really cool ways. Like you came up with a wax as a substitute for lubricants like seal one or frog lube that would have a tendency to dampen the sustain of instruments. And then parallel to that, you started your tuning business, Rivera Steel Tuning. So was that one more step towards sort of owning up that work and making it even more personal. Now you were the name, the
Hmm.
business that people were interacting with.
Yeah, that's those. It's kind of funny because everything, all like both of those things, the wax development and then Rivera steel tuning, weren't anything that necessarily came out of long time thoughts and aspirations as much as they were kind of just reactions. And so the wax came from the reaction of having the a couple times where Sraz had gotten incredibly muffled, and it didn't happen every single time. It would, sometimes it would happen, and then I just realized it's like, well, I don't want it to ever happen. And once we kind of figured out that was what was going on, I just tried some things and tried some different formulas, and luckily it worked. And so the wax kind of was born out of a reaction to these negatives that I was seeing enough times when you oil that 3 instruments a week, 4 instruments a week, you start to kind of you just kind of pick up on these differences. It would sound great, I'd oil it and nothing, let's try something else. And reverse stilting was kind of a reaction as well to market changes and the world growing exponentially, and the handpan building with different companies able to somewhat mass produce these days. It's kind of it gets really scary for a new builder or even existing builders. It becomes a very scary thing. It's kind of threatening in a way. You start to kind of just get a little paranoid that, well, how is this going to affect sales? Will it be okay? Will I be able to still put food on the table? And I had been doing so much retuning, and I realized I really enjoy it. And so I decided to, if there's going to be this many handpans in the world, there's going to have to be people that know how to service them, and a luthier, if you will, for the handpans. And so I figured I'd go ahead and just put that out there and start having that as something that could help just keep myself on my toes. I think tuning other people's stuff can be incredibly eye-opening when you start seeing how many ways there are to get an instrument back in tune, and then how many ways people build. And sometimes you see I've seen some of the weirdest instruments that when dialed in can sound surprisingly nice. You see this like really odd shape that you're not used to, or these really odd ways of getting it there, or different kinds of steel. And every once in a while I'm shocked at how nice it can sound. And so it always it keeps you thinking outside your own box, and it's really easy. I think one of the hardest things about building is it's really easy to fall into a rabbit hole that it's hard to tell if it's the direction you want to be going, or if it's just the direction you're in and almost stuck in or not. And so I think doing retunes on other people's instruments kind of helps keep that fresh, and just kind of helps you always keep your focus on your ears more than your experience per se. And so yeah, both of those things kind of just, again, nothing I would have ever really thought one day I'll be doing this. It was just kind of like this seems to make sense right now, and I'm really enjoying it, so I might as well just push it one step farther.
Yeah. So now we're here, and that next step was for you to start making your own handpans.
Yeah.
So you just
Yeah.
made the announcement at Reminiscence, the handpan gathering, the remarkable handpan gathering that you and Chef D, David Gallagher, put together.
Yeah.
It was an amazing time. And you revealed to us that you had been working for 5 or 6 months really hard and building these amazing instruments, which you brought, which I got to try. And so here is this new chapter. So, man, so first, congrats. Tell me
Thank
about
you.
the Veritas Sound Sculpture.
Yeah, so yeah, that's gosh, yeah. I started to really want to, after I think the retuning business actually is the one that really started opening my eyes to having an idea of what I wanted to hear after playing so many different people's instruments and looking under the hood and understanding more and more and more about the steel. I really started to know what I was more attracted to, whereas before I never really knew what I liked or what I was looking for. I more was always reacting to what I didn't like in the instrument, and always trying to be like, okay, well, here's this issue. Let me try to fix that. And then you fix that, and then you kind of move on to the next issue and all that stuff. And this many years later, I started to kind of see what I like, and I started, kind of in the back of my head formulating what I would do if it was me, doing it from start to finish, and what I would like to hear and feel, and all these things based on the experience of so many different people's instruments. And so, I came up with the idea of building Veritas. The name actually my wife came up with that because it's something I've been thinking about for quite a while. And naming your instrument is a really, really hard task. I didn't realize, of all the things, building an instrument's hard. Coming up with a name for it was almost even harder. And Veritas came from Maria. We woke up one morning and she's like, "What about Veritas?" One, it kind of sounds like your last name, Rivera. It kind of plays off that, Riveritas. And I was like, "Oh, it does. That's fun." And she's like, "You're a very honest person. You tend to sometimes be maybe too honest." And, so Veritas in Latin means truth. And, trying to push for a true sound, the sound that I'm truly attached to. So there's a lot of meaning behind Truth Handpans, which is Truth Sound Sculpture, which is basically just trying to stay transparent and honest about the instruments, about their quality, about what the intention is, what the purpose is, and all that. And it's something that I think I've spent years developing, and I think I feel ready to kind of put that into practice. And then also the V for Veritas. I was going on my 5th year as a professional tuner, I guess, would be, if that's usable, the word professional or not, but I have 5 years of tuning, and so there's a larger V in the logo, and that represents the number 5, which again, like I said, is just the 5 years of development. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so it all kind of just tied together, and it's funny because even when she first said it, was like, I don't know. And then it just stuck, and the more we dove into it, the more meaning we found behind it. And that's where it came from. It was that one morning of just a really intense chat with my wife. So it was really nice.
Well, it's a really cool name, and it's so powerful that all your experience, not only tuning with Saraz, but also retuning dozens of different handpan makes, really informed what you wanted your secret ingredient to be. And not only is it a true experience, but you're remaining true to yourself, and I think you know what you're looking for. Talk to me about who this instrument is for.
Sure. So this is where I probably still find myself as I build in more, like finding myself in a deeper understanding of what I'm going for, which it's really tough. So the part I get excited about is learning how to build for the individual. And what I'm starting to learn the more and more I play these instruments and the more scales I play is that in a lot of ways, certain scales are asking for a certain sound to a point. So if I have a person that wants, say, like a C-sharp Celtic minor, and they just want 7 notes, chances are that person really, really loves a nice, open, blooming, long sustaining sound, because that scale isn't musically challenging. It's not one that makes you have to stop and compose. It's one that you can really just get lost in. And then if I have someone that were to order, say, an F-sharp Romanian Hijaz, 16 notes, chances are that person is going to be A, pretty percussive, or B, very compositional, or both. And with a lot of half steps, like a Hijaz has, or a lot of these harmonic minor scales have a lot of these half steps, it's really hard to have a long, sustaining, stainless steel sounding instrument with all these half steps going on, because now you're having a lot of dissonance sustaining for seconds at a time. And so I find that kind of a scale sounds, at least to me, it's like, obviously it's always kind of like, this is what I'm perceiving is probably happening, so therefore I just need to go for it. And my perception is that every time I play a scale like an F sharp Romanian jazz with 16, 17 notes on it or whatever, I really like it to be a little more staccato, and it's still going to have some sustain to it, and everything's still going to have like a nice balance to it, but it's going to be probably more subdued because that kind of, for certain kind of players, it's the player that's being accentuated more than the instrument. So the person, a person that's been a master percussionist would I want to hear, as a percussionist myself, I really want to hear what their hands are doing without the sound and sustain and bloom of the instrument taking that over.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, a person that's really looking to just sit down and express themselves in a really meditative way, or and still maybe be able to do some percussive stuff, might want a different kind of an instrument. And so I'm kind of in this place of trying to understand. I've spent a lot of time building, when I was in those couple months before I released everything or talked about it and brought it up to Reminiscence Handpan Gathering, was that I was building some really short sustaining instruments and then some really long sustaining instruments, and trying to understand, can I to an extent control that, and then understand what scales kind of lean towards a certain sound, and then what kind of player leans towards what that is, and is that something I can, honestly provide an offer or not. And so yeah, I'm going now. That's kind of feels like the next rabbit hole is just understanding what is it going to be that it brings out the player, and not so much the instrument taking over. I feel like this instrument is really expressive of who's behind it. And I think in some ways the instrument, if it's built, I mean, I could be wrong. This is always personal opinion, of course, but sometimes I think there's a leaning towards the instrument kind of taking over the player. If you sit down with it and it instantly just brings all this sound out, it's amazing. It's a really cool shock and awe feeling when you first sit down with it.
Mm-hmm.
But is that going to stifle the player and hold them back, or is it going to bring them out? And I think that's really important to understand as a player looking for a new instrument, is which one brings the most of you out of it, and is the instrument actually shadowing over that person? And it can, and from there, I'm like, I don't know, I can just rant forever about what I could think about it, but that's pretty much the mentality I have when I'm sitting down behind an instrument, or if I'm trying someone's out, is that, what does it do for me? And does it make me want to sit down, and does it start just, there's certain instruments that, that feeling when you sit down and your hands just don't want to stop going. And for everyone, it's different. And the idea, I think one of the hardest things I had to mentally prepare myself for was that inevitably I'm probably not going to be able to make an instrument that is for everyone. The idea to walk away from this drive to be like, I want to build the most universal instrument, versus the one that I guess, I can only do as good as I can for what I know. And what I know I like is kind of scale dependent, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you and I had chatted about this idea that if everyone likes you, no one will love you. And
Sure.
And it sounds like you're really pushing custom-made handpans to the next level. A handpan tailored to the player, a timbre, a sound texture tailored to the sound model. I mean, this is all really remarkable, and it's cool. I don't think I've heard this from anyone else yet, so I'm really glad you're exploring that avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about kind of the months leading up to this launch. Did you keep it entirely private? What are some of the roadblocks or lessons that you learned through this phase of sort of pre-launch?
Well, I guess right now it almost feels like I'm cheating, because I kind of feel like a little too relaxed about everything. I've been happy to take my time. I've been really enjoying not having pressure. And so this whole time of building, no one's been asking me for anything or wondering when anything's going to be ready, or really like I haven't had any kind of push pretty much at all besides what I put on myself. The biggest push I felt was actually getting ready for Reminiscence so I could show, I wanted to bring something nice, but I just started building my own instruments 3 months before that. And so I was hammering like crazy, trying to learn as fast as I can so I could at least have something decent to bring there. And so now that phase is over, and I've kind of got that fear and worry about presenting myself for the first time out of the way, now it's mostly just been kind of casually getting my more of my mentality in line about what I want to, how I want to sustain this. If let's say, say best case scenario, say it's successful, how do I want to sustain that? And what kind of things should I watch out for? What kind of things do I want to make sure what kind of traps do I want to not fall into? Where can I say yes and where do I want to say no? Kind of getting that mentality side. As you know, I know I've been fortunate to be friends with a lot of amazing, incredible builders, and I've gotten to see, where the pain comes from and where the satisfaction comes from, in a lot of different ways and a lot of different avenues. And so trying to cultivate all that information into what I would like to be and what I think I could sustain being. And so that's been kind of the last couple of weeks while I slowly but surely get. I've been building up my Instagram page just because when I released this and make an official notification about it, it'd be fun to have people see that this isn't just hey, I've got an instrument, check back in a couple of months, I'm getting going. It's more like, hey, this is what I've been working on, and now I'm ready to share it and hopefully have an actual experience for people to have. There's going to be, there'll be about 50 or 60 posts on Instagram already ready to be shown, and my YouTube page will hopefully have, quite a few build up of videos to check out, and the podcast, it'd be nice for people to sit down and be able to listen to this and have a nice just presentation that this wasn't just thrown out there to get instant attention or instant gratification. This is really kind of something that I wanted to present as a lifestyle. This is something that I've been doing all my life, but now it's just me, and it's really scary in ways, but also you can kind of see there'll be a small history already that you can kind of check out and spend some time with, and in ways get to know me without just kind of being like, because it's really hard nowadays. There's so many new builders out. How do you even stand out, or how do you approach this new market? And I think for me, it's the handpan's not going anywhere. If anything, it's just obviously getting more and more popular. And so there was no rush to hurry up and hurry up and put my name out there, hurry up and be the new builder. It was been really nice just to sit back and be like, this is great. The handpan interest is growing. We can actually in ways relax in that way. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I think in ways it's a good way to actually step back and just know this is great news. Now it's more time to focus on how do you want to present yourself, and how do you want your instruments to be, and what can you dial in to present this. And so it's been in ways very, very easy to sit back and kind of put it out there, because I think it would have been terrifying if I just put myself out of line and say, before I even had instruments built, if I had 5 people ask for an instrument, I'd be freaking out, because I'm like, well, I don't know what I can build yet, because I haven't done this for very long. I've only built 4 instruments, but now I'm hitting up to around, I think I just glued the 15th instrument, and which still, in the grand scheme doesn't sound a lot, but I do have the 300 other ones before me, and a couple hundred retunes with that. And so but the learning curve has been offset a good bit. And I've got some great builder friends that have shared a lot of knowledge with me, and I can't be more appreciative than that. But yeah.
Yeah. it's cool to see that you're, relatively relaxed about it. And I think it's fair because it's return on investment, right? Like for over a decade, you've been investing into your own skills, but also the community. And if you look at the Reminiscence Handpan Gathering as a beta test for the
Hmm.
Veritas Sound Sculpture, well, beta
Yeah.
worked really well. I think
Yeah,
you even
thank you.
had, did you have your first customer there?
I did actually. Yep. I sold my first instrument there and to a very, very old and dear friend
Yes.
in the handpan community. Danny Sorensen was the first one. And I kind of feel like in ways it's like a good omen,
Yeah.
So, and since then I've actually sold two more, just a couple instruments have been sold and locally. And so it's, even before the announcement, before the reveal, it's been nice because it has been actually kind of happening. And
Hmm.
so I think I'm trying to enjoy this quiet time because, again, if my dreams come true and I'm successful at this, I can see where the stress could get a little bit higher if I'm not careful. And so I'm kind of just in that place of trying to enjoy the present moment where things are kind of quiet and get kind of just work at a very, very, very casual pace.
Yeah. Well, it's cause for celebration. I'm rejoicing with you because I think this is awesome. I mean, you've built so much relational equity with everyone, and we're just so happy to see you kind of take this step of faith, but also just take this rightful next step in your journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, so where does it go from here? I know you're gonna hit a couple of gatherings to try to present your work to handpan friends around the world. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna head out to Hangout UK in actually next week with my good buddy David Gallagher, who makes the Mackay, and him and I are gonna fly out there and hang out. I get to bring an A2 Pygmy out, which I was really excited about building because this instrument's the one that kind of helped me learn. This is kind of like an A2 Pygmy. I'm gonna build with this style, and my F sharp Romanians, I like to build with this style or something, and so I get to bring that instrument out, which is kind of a turning point for me in my understanding of my builds. And after I return from there, I'm hoping to have just some more videos I can add to my YouTube and Instagram pages, just to help people see that again, when this is all released, that here they're being played out in the actual wild. Here's some real people playing them. And other than that, I'm getting I'll have a couple of instruments. If they're not sold by the time I release all of this, they're going to be sold that I'm calling the journey pans, which are some of the instruments I was building leading up to Reminiscence Handpan Gathering that were not they're not bad enough to throw away. They don't represent what I was going for, but in no way did I feel like there was a few that definitely went straight to the garbage. But there's a couple I've dubbed, actually six of them, that I dubbed the Journey Pan series because they're nice instruments. They're not exactly representative of what I was going for, and those will be sold quite cheaply in the coming days on the website and everything. I wanted to stay away from crowdfunding. I didn't want to get into that realm. I feel like this is something I've done for too long to come out and ask for money to help me do it. And so I wanted to, I think I've put in about $30,000 into my shop and the steel. I got like a year's worth of steel, and so like the investment and the time off from work has been intense. And so
Hmm.
the way I figured I could be supported that way was instead of having someone send money to me and not know what kind of builder I'll be, I could actually just spend that time quietly building and then present a couple instruments that, like these Journey Pan series, that can be sold cheaper to help just kind of buffer that 4 to 6 months of very low income,
Hmm.
and then still be like, here's where I'm at, and here are these instruments available for cheaper. So you're investing in me and you're actually getting something out of investing in me by buying these instruments, and then you know where I'm at, and it just felt like a better approach to that. And so I have a couple of those that'll be traveling with me to possibly Steel Mountain. I haven't 100% sure that I'm going to make it out there or not, but yeah, so for the most part, I'm going to Hangout UK for a presentation. Other than that, just trying to get my last nuts and bolts put together for the website. I think I'm going to be putting some of these just on my Rivera steel tuning website. I don't really plan on relying on the website necessarily as much for sales. Like I don't really plan on posting them on there all the time. So I'm kind of in this gray area on how I want to go about the sales. But right now it's been organically happening where I had someone show up for a retune. They played one of my instruments and luckily they loved it and they bought it right then. And I've had one other person actually order a custom made instrument, which is an A2. And then some people bought them at the gathering. So I'm kind of right now, I don't really know how I'm going about it as much as I'm just kind of flowing with it as it goes. And so,
Yeah. Well, we're spreading the word.
yeah, thank you.
I was interviewed on another podcast just a couple days ago, hosted by someone that you know, I think from Pan Oz. His name is Michael Bardisol.
Oh yeah,
And,
wonderful guy.
Yeah, totally. And I'll have him on this podcast soon, but I may have revealed to him and his audience that you had just launched your brand.
Oh yeah, no, it's wonderful. Tim Tom, who's one of the organizers of that festival, has
Yeah.
just asked me. He's like, "Hey, can I announce it to everybody?" I was like, "Give me just a couple weeks because I'm gonna have all the stuff publicly." The only time I've gone online and said what I'm doing has been for Reminiscence and for Hangout UK, the two I was getting ready to go to, and it's been fun actually just to kind of let it leak out in a natural way. And I haven't really hashtagged on anything on Instagram, and it's already kind of growing slowly but surely. And so no, I'm really appreciating that this natural organic way of letting it kind of spill out, because I am kind of at that point where I'm a bit tired of challenging myself and just building for myself and building whatever I think is hard to do and whatever I've never done before just so I can have the experience. When I finally got my first request for a scale from a person, it was an incredibly satisfying feeling to sit down and hammer with an intent, with a person in mind. And so I'm kind of at that point where I'm really excited to be building for people and not just going hard at the R&D phase. So
Yeah.
I appreciate anything that you leak. It's really nice, especially coming from you. It's it's a huge honor since, I mean, again, as long as I've been in this, I've known who you were this whole time, and it's really fascinating to see that you're still diving deep into this and taking it to new levels. And every time I've seen you at a gathering, you really, truly, passionately sit down and talk to people on a very deep level about the handpan in so many ways, whether it's, from the business side of it or the spiritual side of it and the human side of it. And it's, it's great to see and be part of that with you.
Well, I appreciate that. And actually, from a selfish point of view, it's just really neat to have handpan maker friends and to get an insight into what you're going through making these instruments that we once thought were impossible to build, and I still think I could never do it. But it's incredibly valuable and enriching. Even as we wrap up this call and I go tap on a handpan, like it's cool to know that, hey, my friend Josh makes those, and it makes it relatable and meaningful. And so I really appreciate you taking the time. And man, I just wish you so much success and fulfillment in sharing what you've built, what you've made with your hands. And I'll put all the links in the show notes of this episode, but I guess for now we can redirect folks who want to learn more to riverasteeltuning.com. Is that right?
Yep. There, and I guess by the time people probably hear this, the Instagram page for Veritas Sound Sculpture is up, and as well as there's a YouTube page for Veritas Sound Sculpture as well. So I'm hoping by the time this episode is out, I somewhat have my ducks in a row, and those three places will be, a nice place to get to know me, I guess.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much again. So good to chat with you as always. Safe travels to Hangout UK. Say hi to Rob and Kelly for me.
I will. Well, I really appreciate it as well, and I can't wait to join you again for the next episode.
That sounds great, man. All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Josh again on the podcast. I think it's really incredible to see his progression from player to tuner to maker. You hear me joke about him being a superhuman now that he makes handpans. But the truth is, Josh is so humble and down to earth, like so many other handpan makers, that I'm really glad he's doing this. I'll admit sometimes I fear where the art form is going when I see ads of anonymous handpans sold to anonymous people through anonymous systems, when it's been so meaningful and personal up till now. But then I remember that there are so many good people doing good work in this space, like a coalition of players and makers working together to preserve what's made this instrument so special to us. Hey, can you believe this is episode 20 of the podcast? There are many more voices I want to introduce to you over the months and years to come. But let me say thank you for being here, and thanks for listening. Podcasting is interesting. There's no back and forth. You can't really interact on Spotify or iTunes. So I created the Handpan Podcast Community, which is a Facebook group, not meant to replace any other handpan-related group on Facebook, but it's just a place that's available when the time comes for any question or discussion about something you heard on the podcast. As a reminder, you will find show notes and merch at thehandpanpodcast.com. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and talk to you in the next one.